All right, so let's get started. I just want to make sure everyone is seeing the PowerPoint presentation.
I can see it.
All right.
Yes, I can see it.
Great. So, welcome for our first series of the year. We're like almost there. Well, you guys are almost there, but I'm really excited for you guys. I know that we have a few people that are new here with us. So, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Ryan Walker. You guys can just call me Ryan. I am currently a fourth year family medicine resident at Lawrence Family Medicine Residency in Lawrence, Massachusetts. I'm also one of the board members of the Association of Black Family Medicine Physicians. And tonight we'll be talking about ranking strategies. I also have one of my co-residents who I'd like to have her introduce herself to you all. Dr. Tran.
Hi, everyone. Congrats, you guys are almost to the finish line, this is a super exciting time. I'm Tina Tran. I'm one of the third year residents at Lawrence, along with Ryan. And I think it's incredible that she does this series, and I'm always happy to jump in and share another perspective. I am originally from Texas. Ryan and I are both Southern transplants, although Ryan has been in New England a little bit longer. So happy to answer any and all questions about going to residency out of state.
Definitely. First, I kind of just want to check in and like see how people are doing. Like, how are you guys feeling? How have interviews gone? Are you guys finished? Do you still have a few left? How are you guys doing? You guys can just unmute yourselves and talk.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy. Thank you, Ryan, Dr. Tran, for putting this on. Dr. Walker, sorry, and Dr. Tran for putting this on.
Call me Ryan.
Sorry. Done with the interview, just feeling like a little bit overwhelmed with like my pros and cons list. I think I went a little bit too much, and now I'm like, I don't know. It's just hard to distinguish. Like I have like a program that's like my top, and the rest I'm just trying to figure out like where they should like lie. But yeah, it's kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that's a normal place to be. How are other people feeling? Thanks for sharing, Wendy.
Hey
Hi,
everyone.
I'm Karun. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I didn't even realize I was mute. I was mute. Hi, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Karuna, and I share the same feelings as Wendy. I'm just kind of feeling like overwhelmed. I don't really know like where to begin with creating my rank list. Like Wendy said, I think I know like my top three, but after that, I don't know where to go from there. So I'm excited to hear like any tips and advice.
Definitely.
Hey everyone, my name is Rashida. Thank you again for putting this on. For me, I'm just nervous about sending a letter of intent, like to do it, to not to do it. What do you say? Is it worth doing? So for me, I'm just nervous about that. Like, do I send it to 4 or 5 places or just one?
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about that at the end. And I'll show you some example ones that I sent out when I was going through the process as well. Other thoughts?
Hi guys.
Hey.
Hi, my name is Marwa. I just feel anxious. I have 2 programs, like I can't decide between them. They're both in the same state that I live in. And one is closer to my house, so nothing is going to change. I don't have to change anything. The other one is like 2.5 hours away. So still don't know which one to put first.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing this.
Of course. Yeah, location's a big thing, like, having to move or not to move and all of those things. So that definitely takes, for some people that's more important than others, but, we can talk about that as well. Other thoughts?
Thank you.
I can go. Hey y'all, it's Adjua. Right now I'm just learning that the trade-offs look different in different places, and it's just really hard to, weigh them because they're so different when the spaces are different. So I'm really dealing with that right now.
Yeah, Ajwa, that's really important because I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I wish I could take this thing, and make like my own little residency. But it's like, well, I had to really decide like what's priorities and like what's important for right now, what I really want, right? So definitely I was that person. So I was like, I like all of them. This is great. That's great. But yeah, that's definitely feeling as if you have to, like, if you make a choice, you might be giving something up. Is that's real. Yeah. Other questions or thoughts?
Another thing I'm struggling with is because interviews were virtual. I don't know if I really got like a good sense of the program or just like the vibe of how it will be like when we are there. I know that's just another thing.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are now the second class kind of going through this, and I can't say that I know what that feels like, right? So if you're already part of the ABFMP, like Agile is one of our medical student leaders. There's a group, and you guys can kind of talk about that and talk about there are some now interns that are part of the general group me, and you kind of get their perspectives maybe a bit. I can't talk as much to that, but I remember that being a big thing. And I was actually talking to one of my own mentees about, if there were places that were close to where she can maybe drive and like just see in the city. Typically the residencies won't let you visit because it's kind of like unbiased if you visit, and other people don't visit. So that part you might not get, but for people that might be choosing based on like, the location in the city, that might be something that can help you in that regard. And then I'm not sure how long residencies are going to be hosting. Like some places do like second looks that are supposed to be a little bit more informal. I know that's something that our program done, making sure you kind of go to those. And if there was someone that you feel like you really connected with, like reach out to those people, right? And say, hey, like I had a few more questions after my interview that I would like to talk to you a little bit more about. Because I definitely feel like on the interview trail, there were people at programs I was like, oh, we could be friends, and even after I matched, I still reached out to them and was like, hey, like what advice do you have like starting as an intern, because I just thought they was cool people, right? Even though I didn't end up going to the program that they were at. So don't be afraid to still reach out to people. But other thoughts? If not, we'll go ahead and get started. But this is definitely supposed to be a space for you guys. Other thoughts? All right. So you guys are like almost there, like the finish line. And I want to first say that like I know sometimes when you're going through this process, it's so overwhelming to think like, oh my gosh, this is a really big decision and it's like going to determine the rest of my career. And it's not, I mean, it's important, but it's not going to determine the rest of your career, right? You guys are amazing. These programs like interviewed you because they really want you, right? Like a lot of these programs are receiving upwards of like 500, 600 applications, and they only interview like 100, 150. So, you already made a cutoff, right? So just know that, you are desired and you are valuable. Because I think sometimes we forget that we're just like, so I just want to be like good for this program, but you also have to make sure they're good for you. So we'll talk about that. So I think some things as you're kind of really thinking about, okay, like how do you want to rank, is important to really start to reflect. I think these were some big questions that came up for me. Is like, what do I want my practice to really look like, right? I want to go to a place that kind of embodies that so that I can continually practice and move towards that goal, right? So if you know you really want to be community-based, it's probably best that you go to a community-based residency versus a big academic institution. Or if they might be academic institutions that have some programs that are, separate, that are community-based, that might be another opportunity if you're really thinking about academics, right? So that's like something that's really important. Like, are there people at this residency that are doing the things that I want to do, right? Because ultimately, these are also going to be your colleagues as well, right? They're not just always going to be your teachers. Residency is a finite amount of time. After 3-4 years, depending on what program you go to, these are going to be your colleagues. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Does this residency have the values and the structure of the practice that you want to have in the future? Some other things that really came out was like, what do you want in a residency? So we kind of talked about this. It's like, it's kind of hard because like this program might have this specific like unique thing, but it's like some things are like nice and glittery, but it's like, is that really important to you? Or is it just like, you just think it's cool? And that's fine that you think it's cool, but I think, really determining like what's the top 3 or the top 5 like big priorities for you and big themes, right? So for me, I know when I was going through it, was like community is really important, outpatient is really important, and then full spectrum family medicine was really important to me. And so I really needed to go to a place that had significant amount of OB to really determine whether I really wanted to do it or not. That was my philosophy in doing it. But also a place that was really going to let me to develop the procedural skills that I really knew that was important to me as well. So try to go back to those big themes in your why, because no one residence is going to have everything. Like, and no one residency is perfect either. So I hope, and you guys also asked about like, what are the things that you all hope like the residents would probably change? Because I think some people get a little bit surprised at certain residencies sometimes. But if you really stick to those big themes and keep that in mind, the other things will follow, right? Because the other thing is like residency doesn't make you. Most of the residents make the residency. And I think people forget that part. And so there's flexibility within residency to still pursue things that you are interested in. And so asking about flexibility and electives, and can people do electives outside of the residency as well, because maybe this residency doesn't have some of the other things that you would want, but it has all those big theme things that you want. But if there's an opportunity for you to then go seek those other things that they may not have, that's a plus, right? And then the other thing was like, what is really important for me to learn within residency versus outside of residency, because your learning doesn't stop after residency. I know we like to think that residency is like, this is where I'm really going to become the doctor that I want to be, but you're going to develop skills and your interests are going to change even after residency. So I think it's important to kind of keep that part in mind, because you can say like, okay, well, even though this might be an interest, I'm not giving it up. I just know that this is something I can pursue after residency. And that kind of helps you to really think about what's important for the residency as you're ranking. And then also think about like your non-negotiables, right? So, if you really are interested in OB, don't go to a place where they don't have a lot of OB, right? Even though everything else might be great, because OB is one of those things that is hard to learn after residency. People aren't just gonna let you deliver or just decide to teach you how to deliver after residency. So that's probably like a non-negotiable, even if you're uncertain if you want to do it or not, because you want to have the option to do it after residency or not, right? And this is the time to really help you to decide that, but you have to have the opportunity to decide it or not. So those are like some big things that came up for me. Tina, you have anything else that helped you to reflect on what you how to decide on residencies?
I think also there's like the things about the program, and I think a couple of people had alluded to this earlier too, but I think for residency, more than like any stage before that, like med school or college, etc., location is very important. It's temporary in that you're only there for 3 years, 4 years, but it is a really rigorous time. And like I think looking at if you want to go to residency in state, if you're geographically bound for any reason, or you're looking to broaden your scope a little bit more, like those are all very valid things. And I think like for me, I being from Texas, I knew that I wanted to like ideally practice in a state that had expanded the Affordable Care Act, had like a different delivery care model, had just like different, like just see a different part of the US for a little bit. But I think even reflecting on like how COVID has changed things, like it is harder to see family. You have very limited time off. So, and people start thinking about family planning and a lot of other things during that time, or you might not even be thinking about it now, but it does come up the longer you're in residency, because you are, you're going to be doing a job, like you're going to be a professional, and that's really different than being a student. So, I mean, I would say the extra thing that I would add to Ryan about, in addition to the core parts of the residency and the training aspects that really are non-negotiables, like just be mindful of what type of environment you'll be in. Like if you'll be in a city, like do you actually like city living, or is it going to just drain you to not be near nature and just to be around a concrete jungle all the time? Cost of living really, I honestly think it works itself out for the most part. Like there's adjustments. It might be a little bit more expensive in bigger cities, but they generally adjust for it. But it's more just like the things that you'll be able to do to like relax and unwind, like outside of the long hours you'll be in the hospital. What does that look like, and how is that going to fill your cup? Otherwise is really important to think about as well. All those like non-tangible things are really important.
Yeah, thanks for adding that piece. And I think for me, I've always been kind of like an adventurous person. And the way that I ended up ranking was like either I was going to be here at Lawrence or I was going to be in Washington, honestly. For me, I was like, oh, this could be something new to live on the West Coast. But I also like the way that they practice medicine a bit differently. So, but I think for a lot of people, like just deciding whether to be close to family or further away from family, or even like accessibility to family, right? Because Lawrence was my first choice, but I think about it, I was like, oh, if I would have ended up Washington, like, man, 6-hour flights and sometimes layovers, it would have been a lot to just come home to visit versus already being on the East Coast. So, but even like thinking about, is there an airport that has, accessibility to multiple flights, depending if you're in a rural area or not, is like something I really think about. But yeah, that's a good point. So, and then like as it relates specifically to the ranking, I think something that was really helpful for me is like this, I'm very skills oriented. So it was like, for me, it's like, what skills am I going to leave with from this residency? And this may differ from everyone, right? Like this might be, more so related to, being able to serve certain populations, or this might relate to, so many different aspects, but really keeping in mind, what is that practice that you really want? And then comparing 2 at a time, I think was really important for me. So my experience was actually really nice because our deans are very supportive, and I literally went to go see my dean before ranking opened, and she literally just like went through the list with me. Okay, out of these 2, which one? And you start to kind of like, move people up or down. Out of these 2, which one? So really comparing 2 at a time was helpful, rather than just like looking at your whole list and be like, I don't know where to put these people. And it sounds like from what you guys are telling me, like you kind of have that initial like feeling of like, you know, who your top are going to be, but now you're trying to figure out everybody else. Or you may have had the other experience like, oh, I cannot go there. Like these people just don't understand me. And that's okay too. And I want to say about those is that, you know, it's okay to not rank them, because I think the other thing is like, you don't want to end up somewhere that you may be miserable, right? So when you rank, you should be ranking on where you feel like you will be your best self at and become the best position at. But if you feel like you would be completely miserable, I wouldn't rank them because, or if you are like very, you know, concerned or anxious about it, like make sure they're last. So just don't feel about not ranking somewhere also. And then also couples matching, I think is another big thing that people do ask about. I haven't had the experience with couple matching, but the important thing is to make sure that you're first looking at geographics, because some people are like applying within the same specialty or separate specialties. And so you're really looking at geographics first and then looking at the programs within that geographic area. So that's the biggest thing. And then the other thing is like nothing's finals until the submission date. So, you know, ranking opens tomorrow. You know, you might put an initial little drafting in there. And then in 2 weeks, you might be like, oh, actually, I'm going to move this around. And that's okay, you know, so nothing is final until you press that submit button. So this is still a time for you to ask questions and reach out to programs and make, you know, clarifications if there are any clarifications that you all have. So that was kind of, you know, my 2 cents on the ranking. I think this part has a lot to do more so with like reflection. The other thing is like, I think for me, because I know Wendy mentioned about her whole checklist, I started out that way and then it went in the trash somewhere. I couldn't keep up. But I remember going through the process and people were just telling me like, oh, it's going to be a feeling. It's going to be a feeling. I was like, I don't want to feel it. Like, I want to make sure that it's like, right. But it really did come to a feeling, right? Like you did your research before. It's the informed feeling. You just don't realize it. But like you did your research before applying, you know, you did research as you were applying, you interview with these people, you ask questions. And so, you know, sometimes it becomes like a little blur. But at the end of the day, it really is more informed than you think it is, even if you're not necessarily using a checklist per se. So thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I definitely remember having like postcards or like note cards with the different programs. And I would just move them and be like, oh, wait, but I felt really good about this program because of this. And it was just, you know, you hope that it's things that are like actual, like objective, but it's partly that. And it's partly like your gut feeling, which I would say you can trust your gut.
Mhm.
You've like done your research up till this point.
Other thoughts, questions?
The other thing I'll just mention too is that um, definitely like go off of like how you like feel about the program and like anyone who is a big also key player in the decision, your partner, etc., like your family, etc. But you know, some programs do send out love letters and all these things, and it can be very attractive, and it can kind of like tug you and be like, wow, like they really love me, like that's really great. And that's all well and good, but don't let that sway your decision if you don't actually like them before that letter, because plenty of other programs also love you and aren't doing that. They're just abiding by the ranking rules a little differently. But definitely that does come up. People do send out love letters to applicants. And just be careful with that is what I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point because honestly, the letters don't mean anything. To be honest. So like you might get a card, you know, from a program. I know that we used to do that before COVID, but it was just like a touch that we had. It wasn't necessarily it did we did it for everyone. It wasn't like, you know, specifically this person because we're gonna quote unquote rank them a certain way. So don't take the emails, letters, anything like that, any type of way. There are also programs that don't do that. So even if you have a program that you really, really like and they didn't send you an email, like don't take it a certain way either. And then I know like California, they try not to, they like made a pact kind of in a way to not contact people afterwards, just to try to decrease bias. So yeah, so they don't mean anything. Don't take them to mean something that they don't read, nothing to read in between the lines about. So that's a good point, you know. So I think the other thing that people talk a lot about is like how does the rank work? I definitely recommend. So this is one of the NRP YouTube videos on how the algorithm works. And so I definitely recommend watching it. It's only like 5 minutes, and I know I watch everything double speed, so it's half that. But it's a mathematical algorithm that nobody really knows about, but it's supposed to work and it does somehow work, because a lot of people do get within that like top 5 for the most part. And they say it's supposed to be more targeted towards the applicant, but basically they're you know, looking at your list and looking at the program list because the program also ranks. So they're like saying, okay, like, you know, if Ryan ranked this program, how did the program rank Ryan? And then they're kind of like comparing that. And then they're also comparing it to another applicant, perhaps, right? Like, let's say Tina also ranked this program, but Tina didn't rank the program as high. So now they're going to prioritize Ryan. So I think the video is really good at explaining it. So they don't go into the whole like the actual algorithm, they generally tell you the gist of how it works. So I would definitely familiarize yourself with that. But it's supposed to be somewhat in the favor of the applicant, but also in the favor of the program, make sure there's a good match. So it's not just in favor of the programs. Questions about that? Has everybody watched this video?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah. And then Wendy, you said you had a program that you interviewed at and didn't meet the program director. That's very interesting. Did they tell you why?
Yeah. They said that they were out, I think on leave, but there was like never any follow-up about meet them. And so it's just something I've never encountered. I don't want to share too much. So I don't want to give the program's name, but yeah, I was a little bit kind of like uneasy. And I just heard, you know, they're on leave. I didn't ask too many questions, but that interview was back in the fall. I thought maybe there'd be some follow-up or maybe like some commentary at the second look, but there wasn't. So I just kind of, you know, I'm just kind of like
program director there at the second look. Oh, I think my internet is paused. Hello, hello, hello. Internet went out, came back. Did you say if the program director was there at the second look?
And there was no mention about it. So I don't know. And I felt like it, I don't know, I felt like uncomfortable asking. Maybe I should have asked.
Yeah,
maybe I need to do more to be proactive. I just feel like, I don't know. I guess I just don't know what's going on. So I'm a little bit uneasy, so that's why I figured I'd ask. I didn't know how to ask it, so I figured I'd just.
Yeah. I mean, you should just ask, right? Because I mean, if you interviewed in the fall, and then I presume second look was either probably late winter or this year, and the program
Last
director
week.
still wasn't there, like that's been a few months. And then my other question would be like, was there assistant program director? Because usually people have that.
They had like the associate program director, but and like faculty, but there was like no mention about like the program director at all.
Yeah, I would follow up. And Philomena said that she had a similar experience where the PD wasn't there for the interview day, but was there for the other days. So that's a little fishy to me. I think, the reason why they're missing, it could be so many different things, right? Like, do they have a personal thing where they're maternity leave? Like, I don't know. But usually they will say, they're on maternity leave, like it's like a known thing. I mean, you can't have a baby really. But if there's like something else where the program director is like on probation or something, that's a little, more serious. Versus, do they need to be off for personal, like mental, like health reasons, or someone died or something like that. But the other question would be like, how is the program being led without the program director there, right? Like, is there the associate program director? Or like a question would be, if the program director does not come back, what will be happening? Because I've noticed that they haven't been there for a few months. The other thing is you could reach out to the residents and be like, how have you felt without the program director there? Because honestly, like, the program director doesn't have a big effect on your like everyday residency experience, right? Like, they're really doing some big, like, relationships with the clinic and relationships with the hospital, and making sure that things are in line with GME requirements and like all these other like, different things. And then they're there if you need them. But it's really the faculty members and the day-to-day administrators who are doing your scheduling and stuff like that that I would personally say really matters. Although like your program director is there to kind of lead the residency in a certain way, but it's not if they didn't have program director, I don't think it's a big issue. Somebody's doing something. So usually that's when the associate or the assistant program director comes into play typically. So I would reach out to them and say, hey, like I noticed this. I would like to ask about that. Is there like any additional information you can give me? And then also talk with the residents, say, hey, how's it been like not having the program director? Like what's going on with that? So yeah. What are your thoughts, Tina?
Thank you.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I think it's a weird situation, but you just kind of bring it up and be like, hey, like I just noticed this. Can you give me some clarification? And it's totally legitimate and reasonable.
Yeah, thanks for asking that.
Thank you both.
Toyosi asked, should we factor in work hours to our rank list? Like when you were asked repeatedly about different interviews, how you feel about working long hours, i.e. more than or equal to 80 hours a week. I think this varies for different people, right? So many programs are structured so differently. Like I know some places do like Q3-day or Q4-day call, or like, all these different structures, or some places don't even have nights, or some places don't have 24 hours, or, all of these things. I think in residency, you are going to be working a lot, especially when you're inpatient compared to outpatient. Again, that structure varies by what program you're going to. I think the bigger question is, do you feel like people are overworking these 80 hours? And the other thing I want to put in place is that everyone talks about this 80 hours, 80 hours. These 80 hours are averaged over a month period of time. So what that means is that programs can literally work you 100 hours a week for like 2 weeks. And then the other 2 weeks of the month, you're on outpatient. And then it makes it look like you haven't worked. It averages out over the month to be no more than 80 hours a week. So I also want to keep that in mind because I think people talk about this 80 hours, but no one talks about it really being average over a month. So there are going to be times where you are definitely working more than 80 hours a week. Now the question is that happening more than it should? And are people actually reporting it? Because your schedule might look one way, but you might end up leaving the hospital an hour or two later because you had late admissions or something and you need to finish notes. A lot of times residents aren't going back and changing their schedules to say that they worked an extra hour or 2 hours because that takes more time. So I think this might be a question for residents, like to go back and say, hey, like I noticed this is a question that was asked a lot. Like, do you feel like you guys are, working more than is allowed to be worked? Because I know some programs are still having issues with that, right? And some programs might be on probation for it for whatever reasons. So I think that's the better question to ask. Rather, are these programs that are consistently working you to the 80 hours? And then there are some programs that are not. But that's an interesting question that I was asked multiple times during your interview.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, just to follow up with that, you mentioned probation. So if a program, you find out that a program is on probation, is that grounds to like not rank it?
Not necessarily. So what that means is, GME makes all these requirements of what's supposed to be done. I think the question would be, why are you on probation? And what is the plan to get off of probation or to fix whatever it is that caused you to be on probation, right? So I think that's probably more of the question to ask, especially like if it's a program you really, really love, like this might be one of your top 1 or 2 or 3. And that might, I don't want that to sway you necessarily, but you have to think about like why they got on probation to begin with. And then also going back to the residents and asking about how they feel the program is like managing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also say if the other thing is if the program is being transparent about it to OC, like if you ask them, like, did you just happen to find out, or if a program is on probation, they should notify you with a letter and kind of clarify it and be very transparent in the process. And if there's any concerns that you have about that, then that in my mind is a little bit of a red flag. But I think to Ryan's point, like if there's like a clear plan of what the issue was and there's a plan to get out of it, then it happens. There's a lot of regulations that programs have to follow. And sometimes even really great programs can have like a slip up for a reason or another, and it's not necessarily a reason just to discount them.
Okay, thank you for explaining thoroughly.
Yeah, you're welcome. Gabriella had a question. Is it common for programs to have one program director for multiple specialties, like one person who is the PD for both family medicine and IM programs at a hospital? I haven't heard of that. That's very interesting. You don't have to say where that is, but I think for me, I would be, so the other thing to consider, I know there are 2 programs that are like family medicine, IM dual programs. So I do want to make that clarification that it's not a dual program. If it's not a dual program, I think that's a bit interesting because as Tina mentioned, there are so many regulations that residencies have to deal with. And the size of these programs vary by the institution, right? Because, some IM programs can get up to like 40, per class, and so kind of thinking about what the role of the PD is actually doing at not just one program, but both programs, but also thinking about like how much support administration they have at each of those programs. So I haven't really heard of that. I don't know how common that is, honestly, but like I mentioned before, like your PD doesn't have a big role in your everyday life as a resident. But if that's something that you find is like more important for you, that might be something to question a bit of like how their time is actually split up between the two programs.
Thank you so much for your response, Dr. Wong.
Mhm. And then Donna asked another question. What are your opinions on ranking new programs? I have one that I'm very interested in, but I am concerned because during the interview, the faculty did not have all the questions I needed because the program is new. Also, I would like to go to a program that will have a good number of IMGs like myself, but again, that's an unknown. The last question might be a little bit easier to start with first. So if you don't rank a program, your probability of getting into that program, or if you don't rank them highly, even though you really like them, your probability of getting into that program is going to be decreased. So first, when you rank based off where you really want to go. Okay. If you are IMG, we had a session last week on IMGs, and if you needed visas, like that whole process, there are going to be different questions that you ask, right? Like if you need a visa, like do they have a current processing plan on how to support people that need visas? So I don't know if you're IMG who actually needs a visa or not, but that's a very specific question of how they think they're going to deal with
US
that.
IMG. I'm a US IMG. So
Oh, US. Okay. Okay. Perfect. So I think the question is you shouldn't like think about, oh, just because I'm an IMG, I don't know if they're gonna like take IMG, so I don't think I'm gonna rank them as high. If you really want to go there, rank them. The other question about them not having answers to your question, are they like, this is gonna be like their first class ever, or do they only have like 1 or 2 classes above you and that's why they don't know?
This is their first class ever in this specialty. I think they have general surgery, I want to say, in the hospital system, but it's the first family medicine class.
Yeah, so I think, this is normal, right? Like, because they haven't gone through it. When you're going to a new program, there are pros and cons about it, right? Some people actually really like the thought of going to a new program because then there's going to be sometimes a little bit more flexibility in what they allow you to do because they're trying everything out for the first time, right? And they're also going to be asking you for a lot of feedback to see how they should be changing things, typically. And so some people really like that aspect. The other thing is, if you're a very structured person and you feel like you need to have everything kind of like, in a certain way, that might bother you a little bit more because things might change consistently in a new program. So that's something to consider. So I think it's normal for them to not have all the answers because they haven't done it. But typically with these programs, they have to go through a whole application process with GME and make sure that they're, meeting the recommendations. And typically, there's a whole network of program directors. So, the program directors and also associate program directors, they're kind of like communicating and getting ideas from other programs of how things have worked, how other people have, navigated the situation. So it's not that they're going at this blindly. So I think that's something to consider. But I think if there are certain skills that you want, right? Like if you say, I want to be able to leave here, doing deliveries, or I want to be able to leave here doing next one-ons or IUD insertions, or, those types of things, they don't have the numbers to tell you. Right. So the next question is saying, okay, what is the population that we're going to be serving and what is the need that they have, or how have they been accessing care before the program, right? So those kind of questions can give you more insight, and they should know, right? They should know what population they're serving. They should know, like, if they're working a particular clinic, what the clinic makeup is, or what the, delivery rate in the community is, to kind of give you perhaps a ballpark or an idea of what you might be experiencing at the residency, but they aren't going to be able to give you numbers. Like, that's just the reality of it, right? So I think it really depends on what your priorities are within that residency and what they're telling you that their uniqueness is going to be able to provide. So I think it is a little bit, of unknown, when you're going to a really new program where it's like you are the first class. But I know some people have had really good experiences with it because they felt like they had a lot of say in how they can structure things. So
Yeah, I got that impression during the interview. That they really wanted feedback. They're interested in doing that. They want to hear from the residents what they can do, how they can improve. So it doesn't give me too much like hesitation to rank them, because right now they're like 2 on my list, number 2. But I was wanting to know, like, should I be worried? That's why I asked that question.
yeah, I wouldn't be too worried. I think the next thing to consider is like, do you feel like you're going to be supported? Are there people there that are practicing the way that you would want to practice so that you can learn from them? Would be some of like, I think my bigger questions. And like, is this a place that you are going to feel you can thrive?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. That's exciting though. Gabriella had a follow-up question on the probation question. Is there a definite way to check a program's standing? One of the residency search websites showed a history of some sort of accreditation issue, but the PD explained it in a different way. I can't remember the exact details. I don't know about this. This might be something I can get back to you all. I think my go-to would be looking at the GME because they're the ones that are checking all the programs. I wonder if they might have like a search engine, or if you can like call them and get information about it. That would be my like go-to resource. But I'm not sure. Yes, thank you, David, for putting that up there. But that would be my main resource, and then seeing if you could ask the PD what they mean, because sometimes people try to paint stuff in a nice way. Other questions? These are all good things. So thank you, email. So you don't have to do it. It's not going to change how the program ranks you, honestly. Like, nobody's keeping tabs about who sent emails and who didn't. But I know this is a question that people have about, thank you emails. Like, do I email my number 1 or my top, whatever, or, how to respond. So this is like one of the thank you emails that I sent to a program. And some of it was also because I had some follow-up questions. And I think I was just getting into the weeds a little bit here because I was asking about like vasectomy. So I was like thinking that was something I wanted to do and all these things. But just if you like want to thank them and you have a follow-up question, don't feel like you have to make up questions either, just to have a reason to email them. But if you really do have questions, you should definitely get them answered so that you can make an informed decision about ranking. So if you guys want to take a few minutes to read that, you can. So Laureen asked about letter of intent to a program. So Laureen, just to clarify, did the program say you can't contact them post-interview, or they just said that they don't necessarily contact post-interview?
They said that they won't contact us, but then they discouraged any thank you emails or anything like that. They said, don't worry about it, it's fine. Like, you came to the interview, but I just don't know if letter of intent is also considered that on our end to not contact them. So it just was a little kind of unclear.
So if they told you specifically, like, you don't need to send a thank you, I think, the letter of intent is kind of similar to the same, because it's basically people are sending emails to try to sway the program and ranking them a certain way. That's what they're trying to kind of eliminate, right? So even by you just saying like, I'm planning on like ranking you number 1, that's a way in which you're trying to sway the program to say, hey, rank me really high because I really want to go here. So if they explicitly told you that, I would like try not to do it, just to follow directions. But like I said, if you have like questions, usually they're going to respond to your questions because they want to make sure that you can make a good decision about, whether that program. I think you can ask those, you can contact them for that. But knowing that they might not respond to you because they're trying to remain neutral in that way. And then the other option would be to then try to contact the resident instead of the administration people. So yeah, I think the letter intent in that particular situation might not be ideal if that's what they explicitly told you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And so speaking of emails, when I was going through the process, I wrote an email. This is my email to my number one choice. And then I did write an email to my top, I think it was top 5. And I just said that I'm ranking them highly. Like I didn't tell them like, oh, I'm ranking you number 2, I'm ranking you number 3, I'm ranking you number 4. I was just like, oh, I'm ranking you highly. I just wanted you to be aware. And I said like why I was ranking them, what I liked about their program and all those things. The other thing is like, make sure like if you're gonna like email someone that they're number 1, they're actually your number 1. Like don't email a lot of people and be like, oh, y'all my number 1, because that's not good. Because then they're gonna, if they end up ranking you highly and you don't go there, they're gonna be like, what happens? So yeah, you don't have to do this, especially when you're in a place where you don't even know right now. But if you feel impelled to, you can most certainly do it. This is just an example.
Can I ask a quick question about this?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to know, so I've heard a lot of mixed things. Like I've heard, especially for people that are maybe like dual applying. So if you're applying to like a smaller program where they don't accept as many students, I've heard that, you know, definitely send your number 1, but then as far as like your second or even third, that you should, I've heard like either you shouldn't, or I've also heard you can send them, but just say highly ranking. But some people feel like if you say highly ranking, it's basically telling the program you're not number 1, and that can be taken a different way. So I don't know. I know you said you sent to your top 5, and I mean, it seems like that didn't make a negative impact on you, but I don't know if you have any advice or additional things that you've heard from other residents or people on that, especially for people that are like smaller programs. So PDs may talk more.
Mm-hmm. So the PDs are not like talking about like in between themselves about, oh, we have this candidate, did they apply to your program? Like people don't have time for that. Honestly. So there is no communication going on between programs about who applied, and we interviewed them too and they were this. Like nobody has time for any of that, as much as we may think they do. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I think the programs, like everyone's language and perspective is going to be different, right? So it's like, you know, me as a resident, I might not know to email just my number 1, right? Unless I'm explicitly telling them I ranked them number 1, right? So they don't know whether you're like emailing people, you know, blanketly, like you email everybody and you said highly ranked, right? So the residencies aren't trying to kind of read in between it. It's like, okay, we know that they were thinking about us because they wrote an email, but they're not like taking these emails and putting them in your portfolio. And these emails aren't gonna have a big like weight on whether you get in or not, in all honesty. Also like depends on who you send the email to, right? Like if you're sending it to the person that has been communicating with you, like the interview coordinators and like all that stuff, like it's probably not going to get to who you want it to get to. Like I only email program directors because they're the ones, I know that they interview everyone in most cases, and they reviewed all the applications typically. So, you know, they're the ones that are kind of like, I know that they're going to be on the deciding body. So that's the first thing. But in all honesty, like the emails don't make a big difference. Like it's not like this email is going to then sway you to be like highly ranked just because you sent the email, in all honesty. For the most part, they're going based on your application and your interview, to be honest. But I think if it's your number 1 choice, that makes a little bit of a difference. But like I said, some places are going to be like, well, I don't know if they really sending this to everybody or they just really sent it just me, right? So that's the other reason why they can't really take all the emails in all seriousness. And then also they might not even respond to your email. So just because you sent it doesn't mean they haven't read it, but it doesn't mean they're going to necessarily respond. So that's why I said the email thing, like, I don't think it makes a really big difference, but I know some people feel impelled to do it. I don't think that it can necessarily hurt you, in all honesty, because like I said, these programs aren't trying to read between lines either. They can only go based on what you definitively say. So like if you definitively said like you rank them number one, like they can read that because it's very clear. But all the other language, it's not like they're trying to decrypt and figure out what you're trying to say.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Related to that, Prune had a question about a period when we're no longer able to contact programs. I don't think that there is like a particular time window per se. I think related to Prune's question and to what Ryan is saying as well, like every residency program has a different timeline of when they do their internal rank process. And it's not to say like don't get into your head about like, oh, like I have to send my number one email like now, or like I have to time it here and there, just to say that you might send your number one email and it might be after they've finished all the ranking process and they kind of made their internal lists. To what Ryan was saying, where, you know, it's great. Like it's great that you feel like you know what your number one is. But there is very variable effects, if any. It kind of just depends on the program, and it's hard to know internally how different residencies really weigh it. But just like the process and the timeline for every residency and like how they do their lists is really different as well.
Yeah, I know some places are even still interviewing in February, so. So the other thing is that you will oftentimes get emails from residents as well. And this is typically like we're told by the program to reach out to certain people if they have questions that we've interviewed, particularly usually. And then, you know, it's okay to respond to the residents that you don't have any questions if you don't have any questions. But don't feel inclined to like make stuff up just because they contacted you and you want to have something that you feel like you need to have something to say. So this is an example email of me responding to a resident that reached out to me. Just saying that like I appreciate them for reaching out. Like I feel like I got all the information that I needed. I like enjoyed my time with the program, but if I like need anything, I'll definitely reach out to them. And so that's definitely okay to do. So the other thing is, I know you don't want to think about it, and I hope no one on here has to deal with it, but in the event that you do not match, a lot of people talk about SOAP, which is the Supplemental Offer and Acceptance Program. And basically, so when you match on the Monday, and you will find out if you don't match, then there's a process that happens usually Tuesday, well, actually Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday of what we call SOAPing. And it's basically when programs that have open spots and residents that have not matched are kind of, or people call it scrambling, are trying to find matches. So basically, you know, this is another video from the NRMP that's really good that I recommend that you all watch. It's also very short, 5 minutes. But basically what's happening is that programs that have open spots, they can message people and reach out to people through ERAS application. So they basically have access to people that have not matched, and they can reach out to you. Now they can reach out to you by phone, email, you know, however, but you cannot reach out to programs through phone or email you can only reach out to them through ERAS. Until they reach out to you, then you can communicate with them back and forth through email. But it's really honestly like speed dating, in which they like are interested in you, or you may have shown interest in them. They're like, okay, let's interview. You interview, and then they offer you an offer. And if you decline that offer, there's rounds within SOAP. There's like 4 rounds. And if you decline an offer, then you may be able to get basically other offers, but you cannot go back to that other offer that you declined. So either you decline it, you accept it, or you let it expire. So, you know, that's a process that typically your deans will help you through. And, you know, it depends on location, all those things, and also where there are openings at. So I understand this is a very stressful thing for people, but it is, you know, the reality of some people. So it's important to, I wouldn't worry yourself with it right now unless you go through the process. Some people like to be informed. It's a really good video. So questions about any of this stuff?
I have a question.
Mhm.
I may be like overthinking this, but when making like if I have my top program that I'm interested in, is there any way and I send them a letter of intent, is there any way, like telling them like they're my number one, is there any way that they can that can backfire? Like, you know, we know that we got her, like we feel pretty confident about that, so we're gonna put her at like, you know, spot, like a lower spot than we would have if she hadn't told us she was gonna rank us number one.
No, because if they really wanted you, they would rank you higher, right? Because like I mentioned, so they also kind of go, they have the rank as well. I don't know how many people are ranked at each program, but I know when we do it here, like we do automatic top 10 based on scoring stuff, and then we do ranking based on how we do it here, like the next X number of residents. So it's like if they're thinking, okay, we know that Gabriela is like ranking us number one, we really want Gabriela, we're gonna like rank her higher. But as I mentioned, like, you know, it depends on like when you sent your email. Did they already finish their ranking process? Did they not? Do they even care about the email or not? So it may not have an effect at all. And, you know, most programs are trying to be very consistent and standard between how they're ranking, not all programs. But I don't know how much of an impact it does, but that's not a reason for them to rank you lower. That would be more of a reason for them to rank you higher, because as I mentioned, the way this algorithm works is like, if you rank somebody number one and then they didn't rank you as high, you might not get matched with them because they didn't rank you as high either. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not in their benefit if they really, really want you to do that. So I don't think there's a backfire that can happen there. The only backfire is if they found out that you were emailing multiple people, multiple programs that you're there.
Okay, thank you so much for your response.
Yeah. Chantrise asked the question, what are your thoughts on not ranking programs if you don't see yourself at the program, or is it mostly advised to rank a certain number of programs regardless of if you want to go there to ensure match? So there isn't really like a magic number, right? Like a lot of people are told to like interview like 8 to 12 programs at the very least, or apply to that many programs. And then a lot of people are overdoing it, especially with virtual, because you don't have to travel. So, and then it also depends on like how, you know, competitive the programs that you have applied to are. I think this is a personal decision. I think, you know, if you feel like you will be at a program and be miserable, like you will hate it, I wouldn't rank that program. There was definitely a program that I did not rank. I thought I was gonna like them, but after the interview, I didn't like them. And I felt like it wasn't a program that I meshed with or that I feel like I would be the doctor that I wanted to be, because they didn't understand a particular value that I had. And that was important to me. And so for me, I would have preferred to scramble if I needed to go to the program. So that was a personal decision, but I technically over applied. I didn't listen to people when they told me that I did. So, as long as you have at least 10, 12 programs, you should be fine, and you want to cancel one, like, be it. But I feel like residency is hard. And if you end up, everyone is not going to get number one. Like, that's just the way it is. But you should be increasing your probability of being somewhere that you're going to be happy at by ranking the way that you feel, not ranking based on what is the probability that they're ranking me a certain way. Okay. Your rank should be really based on how you feel about the programs and how you will fit in there, how you will be able to grow there. Because if you end up somewhere like you're going to be miserable based on feeling like you had to rank someplace, it can make residency that much harder. So I personally always tell people, like, if you feel like that's a no, don't rank, because you don't want to accidentally end up there.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add too is that this is also a really good time to talk to your med school advisor, whoever's been like coaching you through the process, and be really honest with yourself and with them of like, for example, at my med school, like for every individual person, like based on just like what their profile looks like, our advisors would say like, like ideally, like based on our experience over doing this many years, like you should plan to rank like this number of programs to really increase your odds. And that might differ a little bit person to person, and somebody might not have to completely match everything. But then you, like at the end of the day, you gotta also, like Brian said, like ask yourself, like, would I rather go here or would I rather try my chances at SOAP? And face that trade-off. But it is also, it's a time, like this rank time is a time for a lot of being really, really honest with yourself and what you're willing to, compromise on, what are the non-negotiables, and really like you yourself as an applicant, but also know that it's not a personal process. It's not anything against you as like a human being or how you are. Like all of these programs, to Gabriella's point earlier, they also want to increase their odds because it doesn't look good to not have filled spots in their residency. So it doesn't make any sense for them to say like, oh, we're gonna like put this person lower. So
yeah, thank you for adding that. And as I mentioned, as on this slide for resources, the deans play a big role because they know your application, right? And they also know how students coming from your school have matched in the past. And so I would definitely recommend meeting with them once, twice, however long you need to, because they also want to make sure that you match too, right? Because that looks better on the school. So yeah. Cindy had a question. Do you have advice about what to prioritize more, like people versus program versus location? I have some places I would love to live for 3 years, and then others where I love the people and then like the location very much at all. I know it's a personal values question, so maybe you can. That's okay. Yeah, Cindy. I think this is a time where you decide to talk with a mentor, maybe not so much a dean, but a mentor, because they'll have more time. So they know you personally and they can really talk it out with you, because this differs so much. I know that my mentee that I've been working with through ABFMP, like location is like more important to her than anything, but that's because she's been living in a very like non-diverse place, and it's rural, and she's just like, I can't do this no more. I need to be in a city or somewhere that can have access to certain types of food. And that's okay. Like, you know, if that's something that's really, really important to you, that's what's important to you. And that's also what's going to keep you happy, as Tina mentioned, right? Like, do you need to be around a place that has nature? Do you need to be around a place where you can easily like travel to different places? Like, because you need to find those things outside of residency as well. Residency is hard. And if you don't have something outside of residency, or it's going to be really hard outside of residency, that's going to make residency so much harder as well. So I don't knock people for like feeling like they have to go to some places based on location more than the program. So it really depends, and that's something you have to reflect on and really talk to your mentors about. So I can't really answer that, but those are all different things that people take into account. So for other people to think about. And then Mahima, I think it is, asked about pros and cons about choosing academic versus community programs. I don't know, Tina, what are your thoughts about that? I think it's so they're different, but there's also programs that are kind of intermediate. I feel like our program is kind of intermediate. With yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Tina?
I think this is there's not a set pros and cons list. I would say this is a program, this is a question to ask your individual programs, especially the ones that you're really, really interested in. I mean, with community programs, you tend to have like, it's tighter knit, you can know the system better, you can kind of move within it a little bit more easily. You know, sometimes you can be unopposed more easily at a community program, etc. But again, an academic program, you have like more ready access to specialists, different types of resources. It's really pretty different. And I would talk to the particular programs to see like how they frame like what their strengths and weaknesses are. Because honestly, even among academic and community programs, like there can be pretty big differences in how your learning environment is. A lot of times I like to think about even like, you might be at a community program, but maybe there's like internal medicine and OB and peds, and you know, that's a different experience than if you were at an academic center, but family medicine just happens to run like a big part of the OB service, or you're unopposed in a certain way. And so that can be a little bit different and more nuanced for sure.
I think a lot of people talk about this like unopposed, opposed, and academic versus community-based, but there are definitely places that are in between, especially residencies that might go in between different locations or not. What I will say is that if you are thinking about going into academics, that is the biggest thing of you deciding to go to an academic center, right? Because there are certain things you have to do, certain research, certain publications, certain, you know, resources that a community-based center might not be, a program might not be able to provide you with. Like if you know for sure that you want to go into academics and do research-based stuff, you need to go to academic program, because community-based programs might not be able to provide you with that space or networking, or access to projects and things so that you can pursue that track. I think that's the only time where I really am like, want you to be clear that it's important to go to academic center. Otherwise, like, you know, you can determine if there's flexibility within the community program, and if maybe there's a nearby academic center, or if they have partnerships with certain medical schools or hospitals, then maybe you can, you know, find mentors and do outside things with them. But yeah, I think this depends so much on how the program is structured that it's hard to say exactly. So we'll get to the other questions, but I just wanted to finish this up in regards to your resources. If you're not already part of ABFMP, like go to our website, which is abfmp.org. You guys can become part of our group me, which is a general group me with attendings and residents. And then there's also a class-based group me, so that you guys can just talk among yourselves about how things are going, or if you guys like experience certain things, you guys can bond over that. The AFP strolling through the match is really good. Remember to talk to your deans, your mentors, and then of course the NRMP. You guys should register because ranking opens tomorrow. Well, no, today's the 31st, 30th. So in 2 days, ranking opens in 2 days. But registration deadline is tomorrow, so make sure you register. So I think, for you all, the biggest things is like really reflecting on what you guys want and need and what's going to make you happy. That differs so much for everyone. Talk to your mentors, keep these dates in mind. March 2nd is when rank submission deadline is, so you have a whole month to like move things around, still talk to people, reach out to programs, ask questions if you want to. And then March 18th is match day. So you guys are almost there. And then we have 2 more sessions as part of the series. So after you guys have matched in April the 5th, we'll be talking about managing finances in residency. And then May 15th, we'll be talking about advice for intern year. And if there's other topics, I don't know if anybody have other topics that you might want to consider, we can definitely make that work. As our schedules allows us, give us that feedback as well. And then this is kind of our contact information for both ABFMP, myself, and Dr. Tran, and then of course follow us on all the social medias. So let's see if there's a few other questions. Chayarshi, I hope I said that right. It's asks any thoughts on ranking residency programs that are not-for-profit hospitals versus for-profit, and if that has any bearing on loan repayment qualifications for PSLF. I haven't experienced this. I actually was just talking to one of my mentees, and they were talking about these hospital corporations, and I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that as a thing. So I can't speak on that, but I will say that if it's for profit, it definitely affects your public service loan forgiveness. So your time within residency is not going to count toward that. So, but I can't speak on the whole non-profit versus profit in other ways. Tina, do you know anything about that?
Only that not-for-profit hospitals don't qualify. But the tricky thing is, I think it can be really hard to figure out if your program, even if your program is part of a nonprofit hospital, like if the residency program is like contracted under a subsidiary that's somehow profit related, there might be wonkiness with that. So there's just like, I think there's a lot of tricky parts. I can get into that. I think that in general, like a lot of bigger like university systems, like I would just check, maybe check your top 10 and see where they kind of fall into that category. But I know it can be tricky to figure that out, unfortunately.
Thank you both for helping me with that. Do you guys have any advice on how to actually like find that information out, or like how to ask it in an email without being offensive in any way?
Yeah, you can just, I would maybe start with the hospital or the program coordinator, whoever you're in communication with, and just say like, like I'm really interested in the public service loan forgiveness program. And, I just want to be careful about this. Can you give me any information if the system, the residency would qualify for it? And I think that's a very legitimate, reasonable question that no one would take offense to.
And then if
Perfect.
you,
Thank you both.
yeah, if you're also looking at like places that are for profit, you can like simply ask like, how does this affect the residency, right? Because sometimes the residencies are separate. Like at our residency is under the health center, but it's not under the hospital. The hospital is a whole separate entity. And so that could be the case. Even though you all may be working at a for-profit hospital, the residency itself might be housed somewhere else. So you can just ask like, oh, I noticed that you guys were for profit. I'm just curious, how does that affect the residency and also patient care? And you can it's just like try to open a conversation about it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
So I'm gonna stop the recording. You guys have been great. And then we can keep talking. We're going to go to 8:30, but I'm happy to stay to answer any questions that you guys